With Blake's injury history, was some of the mitigating factor there is that he hasn't had anything like chronic, that it's a bunch
Correct.
of, I wouldn't call, fluke might be too
Some of them
strong.
are fluke,
Yeah.
and obviously they, our people, our doctors took a long, hard look at all of his medical records, did the physical today, thought it was, obviously the Clippers went through a lot of work doing that to decide to sign him to the Supermax contract. So, we think, and he's doing a great job taking care of himself and the whole thing. So, we thought it was a manageable risk.
Were you able to, in trade talks, are you able to view his medicals before?
Not until
agree?
not until we had agreed on the deal.
So like the Mota Eunice deal where you couldn't really figure out anything.
Right, not ahead of time, but we did talk on the phone, and quite honestly, I think there was a pretty good trust back and forth. Jeff had I thought it developed a pretty good relationship with Michael Winger out there, and I talked to Lawrence, and so I think everybody was on the up and up, but you still want to see what the doctors said and everything, and then have the physical. So.
Yesterday, you said when you talked to Blake on the phone, you were surprised by how much he knew about you guys. Was that you in the front office or the personnel you guys had on this team that he was?
No, personnel on the team.
Okay.
Yeah.
Stan, I know you've only talked to him a couple times so far, but how do you think Blake will fit into the fabric of the locker room right away?
Oh, I think, look, first of all, guys like that bring instant respect in. So everybody in there knows what he's accomplished and how good a player he is. So there's instant respect. And just from my little bit talking to him, I think he wants to be a guy that just gets to know people and comes in and plays his game. I don't think he's going to, on a vocal level, try to take over right away. My only point to him is I don't want him to. I don't want that trying to fit in thing to be what he does on the court. And I've seen that happen to guys, they're a little reluctant to have the ball in their hands or be too aggressive offensively and things. Everybody in there knows that's what he was brought here to do. He needs to just play his game. That's why we brought him.
I know he's not a similar player to Greg Monroe, but that first year you had Greg and Andre, you played them together, and then you'd get Greg out like midway through the first quarter, and then he would replace Andre. Is that a similar type of blueprint?
Well, we haven't decided all that yet, but, I do think, there's times where, they'll both be on the floor together, but I think I would like to stagger it where most of the time at least one of them's out there on the floor. Yeah.
How confident are you that, at least in the short term with Ish, assuming he stays at the point and maybe Stanley at the three, that you'll be able to run more with Blake out there, and it's a different style that you'll have to play with that too?
Again, I really think your ability to run more than anything comes down to, can you get stops and rebounds? If you can't get, if the ball's going through the basket, the other team's putting the ball in the basket all the time, you're not going to get a lot of running buckets. So I think it all goes back to defense and rebounding, and I think if we do that, really regardless of who we have on the floor, we're going to be able to run.
Blake's game has changed a little bit since those early days of Lob City in recent years. Do you think that's more to do with him adapting to the new way in the front with front court players and stretching out, or do you think that some of it might have to do with injuries and trying to find other ways to do it?
No, I think his game has matured and expanded. He's become, he was a good passer when he came in. He's become a great passer. Clearly this year he's taken a big jump in expanding his range. He's just taken on different roles. So, he's not just a back to the basket guy. Doesn't have to, he can still get to the rim and get to the free throw line, but he doesn't have to get to the rim on every possession to be effective. He's got a lot of other things he can do. And I think he's a guy with his passing skills and the way he moves the ball and plays the game that helps other people to play well also. So I think that's as big a selling point for him as anything.
How much of a tussle was there over the protections on the picks, and are you satisfied with what you wound up with on that?
Yeah, we looked at it. You never get everything you want. I would have loved to have had more of a protection on the pick, but there's some picks in there that are not going to happen. So, the big one is you want to keep the chance that if you miss the playoffs and you get that very slim chance like Cleveland did of the ping pong ball dropping your way, you don't want to be sitting there on draft night going, what, we were number one? You know, that was the big one. I mean, in reality, pretty hard for us to get picks 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the way I looked at it, and our guys thought it would even be hard based on, you know, they went through the analytics and predictions on all the schedules and stuff. It's even hard to get 8 and 9, you know. So we could have gotten it protected through 6 or 7, and it's sort of meaningless.
Yeah.
What was meaningful was the top 3, you know. I mean, if the ping pong ball does bounce your way, you don't want to be sitting there on draft night going, oh, you know. So you want some certainty on that. Wherever you land is where the pick's going to be. So I think we were fine with what we ended up getting. Would we have liked to have had it higher? Yeah, but I don't think we could have gotten the deal had we pushed it higher. We could have probably pushed it again to 6 or 7 because they knew as well as we did that those picks are not going to happen. So it didn't matter.
I know we played with Grand Rapids a few years ago. He was never in camp with you, though, was he?
No, he was not.
Yeah.
No, he was not. But Otis coached him. You know, we had him. He's. I thought he had a good year in Miami, and I thought he was playing well this year. And you know, he has the advantage of having played with Blake, and so we'll see what happens.
If I told you 3.5 years ago you'd be able to trade Boban, a 2020 second-round pick, and conditional first and get Blake out of this?
Yeah, I mean, it was, you know, there's been a lot of moves to get into there, but what Jeff did was remarkable. You know, whether it ends up working because there's some risk on the injury and stuff, you know, my thing is I mean, for him to be able to get us in position to make that pick is outstanding front office work, and he, you know, this was him. He deserves a ton of credit. I mean, you know, so does Tom, because Tom was the one, obviously, it's his money at stake and willing to take the risk because the guy really is, you know, committed to winning. So you got to give Tom the credit for being as committed as he is to you know, to do this and to take on a guy with that salary, but a tremendous upside for us. And then you got to give Jeff a ton of credit for even getting us to this point where we had a chance to you know, acquire a guy like Blake.
But even with the criticism of maybe drafts and free agent signings, the trades have, for the most part, worked out for you.
Jeff's done a tremendous job, I think, and our, yeah, I mean, look, everything. I mean, I've said it before. I mean, everything in terms of personnel history is, you know, a mixed bag, and I don't mind being held accountable for some of that. But I think Jeff's work in terms of, especially what he does with other general managers, and I think, you know, the fact that, number one, he knows players, but number two, that he's created a trust around the league with his colleagues and they know he's an honest broker, and so he's a guy that people will always talk to about deals. I mean, I know even from our standpoint, I mean, there's certain teams you'd rather deal with than others because you know you're going to get at least honest stuff. It's not true of everybody, and I think it ends up hurting those teams, whereas I think Jeff has us in position that people will talk to us about these things, and I think that's how that materialized, you know, is they'll be honest with Jeff on what they're looking to do, and then when it, you know, it meets what we're trying to do, you get something like that. But if you don't have a guy like Jeff, number one, who's working the phones all the time, but number two, that other people trust is not them all the time. I mean, all the people want is honesty. You know, what are you looking to do? This is what we're looking to do. And also you can go through trade talks with Jeff, and I think it's a big deal when you're dealing with other teams, and particularly with a guy like Blake, is that, you know, Lawrence Frank knows he can deal with Jeff and it's not going to be in the papers the next day. I mean, there's some guys who want to float every deal into the media, I guess out of insecurity, to see what the fan reaction is before they go forward. And so it's tough to deal with some of those teams because, you know, you don't want your business out there, and it creates problems in your own organization. I think people know when they're dealing with Jeff, that's not going to happen, and you can work through a deal. So honestly, I think the way Jeff operates and the way he works, has put us in position to be able to get a guy of Blake's caliber and to take the time to work through a deal without it out there in the public eye.
I mean, it's not a waste of time like the guy in Monopoly who wants to give you Mediterranean and Baltic.
No, it's exactly right. And you know what some of those guys do too is they throw at you something that sounds really good, that they're not ever going to give up, to draw you into a conversation over something that you're not going to give up. And it's absurd. And Jeff doesn't deal like that. I mean, he's pretty upfront and honest. And so I think people, want to deal with him. And I think that's a big help to us. I mean, he's outstanding.